This podcast contains excerpts from New Soul Radio shows. For the full listening experience with music, visit newsoulradio.com. That's NUSOL radio.com. This is Solsei.
The following thoughts and opinions do not represent New Soul Radio, Solsei and Company, or any of our affiliates, advertisers, or sponsors.
You're listening to Gems and Gems with Kim Brio on newsoulradio.com.
Y'all, let me tell you, I'm just about to be so forthright with y'all because life of media, life of production is interesting, to say the least. And my guest that I have here today, we've already had a substantial amount of conversation, you guys. You want to know why? Because Kim was talking and she wasn't recording. Yeah, guys, just one of those moments. Thankfully, my guest is completely fine with it. So I'm repeating some things for myself, but welcome to Gems and Jams Radio, guys. What you do know already from today's show is that today's topic is Black business. And the guest that I brought on today, I brought on because I'm really excited about his perspective in regards to his interest in Black business. Because a lot of times when we talk about Black business on any platforms of any sort, we're talking about Black business in a current sense right now. And often it's also what all these Black businesses are just doing wrong, you know? And what I love about his perspective is that he's looking at this from a historical perspective, especially with this being the anniversary of some very important dates that we're going to get into in a little bit. But Nizm, welcome.
Hello, long time no speak.
The sarcasm.
Gotta lighten it up a little bit.
I want to thank you on air. I want to publicly thank you on air for not just like being like, you know what, I'm not about to deal with her. We just did 20 minutes of an interview and it is not recorded. I thank you for sticking with me.
No problem. It happens to the best of us.
It does happen to the best of us. So a little bit, guys, Nizm is actually my photographer. We just did a wonderful photo shoot yesterday. So shameless plug, but I'm going to have him tell you a little bit about himself and where you can find him before we get into this nitty gritty and get into this good content. Okay. So where can they find you? Tell them a little bit about you.
Sure. Professional photographer, been shooting over 22 years, have a practice in Chicago and Miami. Outside of that, business consultant and finishing up my PhD, hoping to defend by the end of August, early September, which is focused on a section of Black business. So that's the nitty gritty of me.
Which is awesome. And guys, again, this is our second time around, so he's giving you the shorter versions. But I do want to just say, you know, like I said last time when we weren't recording, I'm gonna have to bring you back after so that I can call you doctor. just to redo your interview. We're gonna start calling you Dr. Nizm.
Sure, that's fine.
So, again, thank you for sticking with me, but let's jump in here. We talked about the history of Black business. And my first question for you, how we flowed in so well, was I wanted to know what brought your interest to looking at Black business in this sense and from this angle. And you talked a little bit about your dissertation really bringing you here. And I wanted to know if you could share some of those things and some of those numbers, even regarding specifically Black architects.
Sure. So just to give context, in a past career, I worked in architecture for about 16 years. So it's something I've always been passionate about. In my research, which is kind of focusing on how to increase the number of Black architects in this country, I had to go back to history to kind of see where this started at. But to give context to the listeners, there's roughly 380 million people in the United States. Of that, 15% at the top is 15% at its highest point is Black people. There's roughly 110,000 licensed architects in the United States, and of that number, 2,500 are African American. Digging deeper into that 2,500, barely 500, not 500,000, 500 are African American women that are licensed in this United States as of today.
And I need y'all to understand, this is 2021. We're talking 110,000 licensed architects in our country, of which, y'all, from 110,000, down to, I'm not even going to say 2,500 and give down to 2,500 that are Black. And as you dig even deeper in regards to Black women, only 500 of those are Black women. And this is in 2021. It reminds me of that sentiment where we see those things online and it's like the first Black such and such and such. And I'm to the point now where I don't even get excited anymore because I'll be like, we still having first in 2021? Like, how are we still here?
Exactly.
So go ahead, talk to me a little bit more about how you made that shift from architecture to being interested in understanding Black business as a whole.
So for me, I've always appreciated business because I've always been a creative, but you need to get paid. There's an art to that, ergo business. So over the years, I've been a consultant for many businesses in the United States, UK, Canada. That's another story. But as I got into my dissertation, I had to go back into history to kind of see, well, what has been the trend in the profession of architecture? So from that, I learned a lot more about Black businesses. So to give context, most of us are familiar that slavery allegedly ended 1863, June 19th, 1865. Well, there's a period that I recommend everyone look at called Reconstruction. Reconstruction is the period after slavery where for the first time, African Americans are free and are now starting their own endeavors and their own businesses. You have your first African American senators and things like that. Mm-hmm. So this is a period that roughly goes 1865 to 1880. So you have your businesses coming around, you have your own neighborhoods coming about because now these freed slaves, no longer forced to stay on the plantation, can now congregate and create their own towns, cities, and such. Mm-hmm. Jim Crow comes along, Ku Klux Klan comes along, the military is no longer mandated to make sure the South does right. So now you're starting to have things where people are being lynched. You're seeing your first lynchings outside of slavery. You're seeing people coming up missing, and you're seeing your towns being negatively impacted. So other ones that we are familiar with that lead up to 1921 include Black Chicago, the race riots in Chicago in 1919, Rosewood, which is in Rosewood, Florida, where the town was burned down, and then bringing us up to Tulsa, which now is very popular because we've just passed the 100-year anniversary of Tulsa.
Correct.
For the uninitiated, Tulsa was known as Black Wall Street. It was a Black town that had its own Black businesses that took care of the Black community because a lot of white people were not rushing to give Black people said products and services. It has been said that incident happened and then white residents from neighboring towns came in, bombed, destroyed businesses. I think almost 100 people were killed. All these businesses were destroyed. The first thing that stands out is what happens when we have a traumatic event. Insurance. There was no insurance.
And I want to, before you talk about the insurance, y'all, I want you guys who have not researched, I need you guys to understand these are not just Black businesses like corner stores. These were prominent Black businesses, and a lot of the resentment from the white side tended to be because of the success of these Black businesses and the fact that they were driving cars before their counterparts, or they had luxury furs and they had things that the white community did not have. I need you guys to understand it was not just because Black Wall Street was dubbed by W.E.B. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and he named it that because of the level of business that was being done. This was not, I really want you guys to understand as we talk about this, because he's going to talk about insurance not being paid. And these were not like the corner store that we're used to. No, these were 700 seat movie theaters. These were luxury businesses that we're talking about here.
I also want to interject the irony of it is because these gentlemen and women who had these businesses were from skills that were forced upon them from slavery that they then took and then used to make their own way. So it's interesting. I bring that up because a lot of people used to say, Black people are lazy. So we took a very negative situation where we were brought here against our will. And then we give free labor for almost 200 and some odd years. Mm-hmm. And then we do not get our 40 acres and a mule, even though in other cases, like in the case of Japanese internment camps, we did give reparations to them in World War II. But we did not give African Americans that. Nonetheless, this group of people then strike out on their own, use the skills of masons, locksmiths, builders, carpenters to create their own. And then because they've created their own, envy has then brought about a situation like in the case of Tulsa.
Yep.
Now, one of the other things that we mentioned before, kind of pivoting back,
Mm-hmm.
is that right after Reconstruction, a lot of banks took black people's money and never gave it back. So if you're wondering subconsciously why your great grandma, Mima, and all them don't like banks, that's why. Because a lot of the banks, including in their current form, Citibank was a different name, Chase was a different name, all the big banks contributed to such actions. And even after the Depression, which I'll get into a little bit later, a lot of black people developed a hesitancy because they saw that the government and the banking system did not work in their best interest.
And it's, as you say this, it's so easy as we sit back and we watch the levels of trust that black people don't have. And we blow it off, even as we talk about now, we're in 2021 and people deciding to take the vaccine or not take the vaccine. We're in a place where we've never been able to trust any levels of government, be that economic base, be that medical base. We've never been able to trust. And that's so important, like that he says that, because for me, I used to always laugh at older people like, you don't want to put your money in the bank. Okay. And I never understood the core of why they felt that way, because if they gave it to the bank, there was a likelihood they wasn't going to get it back. Now in 2021, we feel like, oh, Citibank going to give me my money back. I'm going to go to the Chase branch. And that's not what it was. Not what it was.
And to piggyback on that, African Americans have not been allowed to have documentation of very simple things that we take for granted. If we look back at things like Ancestry.com, first, which I think is irony that any black person has to pay for that, given what happened, is just interesting in itself.
I want to pay you to tell me how you torture me and find out what I can.
But I digress. So I've looked up on my father's side, roots in Arkansas as far back as 1825. So, and it's very piecemeal records you're seeing. Mm-hmm. So what paperwork could you have as a black person in Reconstruction that a white person had to respect and give you your money?
And honor. Yeah.
So it gets real complicated. So as you come up to Tulsa, these black people realized, segregation might have been good. It's been asked before, was segregation bad for us? In my younger days, I was all for integration, but I give the caveat of I want economic integration. Dr. Martin Luther King said we integrated into a burning house. Cultural integration was going to happen. Black people make the world go around. We are the trends. And just by human nature, right, black kid was going to sit next to a white kid, so on and so forth. But we have yet to see true economic integration. There's always a caveat or a ... to it.
Yeah.
So before with Tulsa, it was like, okay, we'll create our own neighborhood. We'll create our own doctors. As you mentioned, these weren't just corner stores. These were doctors, lawyers,
whole hotels with restaurants and
that we didn't need to, because if anyone has heard of the Green Book, that was real. You just couldn't go into a hotel or somewhere in the South. You needed to know where you could go, and sundown towns, which still exist in Illinois and in the country today, if it's dark and you black, you might not want to stop there. So all of these systems we put into place for ourselves, and Tulsa was a moment where these white folks got mad, burned things down, and then ultimately these people were traumatized and it never came back to be the same. Mm-hmm. Last caveat, there is a connection to Tulsa from Chicago where John Rogers is the great grandson of a descendant of Tulsa. John Rogers is the founder of Aerial Management, the largest mutual fund, African-American mutual fund, I think, in the world.
Yes. And it's so funny you said that, but I understand now. If you guys look him up, he contributes quite often to the Tulsa and Black Wall Street conversation as the owner of Aerial Investments, but I never really dug in or paid enough attention to know why, because he's a direct descendant. Let me ask you a question as we kind of talk about him, right? Mm-hmm. Look, now we're into the new interview, okay? Because guys, what you gotta understand, this is all stuff that we covered in the last interview. So we're like, yeah, run through that. So this is a new question, right?
Okay.
If you think about men like him who were able to grab something and still make something of it and create a legacy for their family, how do you feel about the legacies lost for those families who never got it back, who who their families had wealth, bluntly, wealth then, and they don't now, and they don't have a family business or a lot of the things that we even look at. I'm just going to be real, y'all. We look at white people and we go, well, Zach didn't have to do anything. That's family money. Well, in Tulsa, we had the ability to have some of that too. So talk to me a little bit about the legacies lost of those businesses for those families and for our culture.
I think these conversations need to happen so that somebody's great grandson or great granddaughter does the digging and do the investigative work. Because you're right. You know, I think I saw a chart recently where it was like the average white family has a value of $171,000. Average African American family has 17,000.
Yeah.
Those stats without context are very detrimental, because it leads you to believe that African Americans have no interest in saving and we're mass consumers. That's not the truth.
That's not the truth.
Most of us older generations push to be better, to save, to push to the next generation. But when you've had physical, economic, and cultural traumas, such as a Tulsa, how do you justify saving? I'll just save the money and keep it in my mattress, as old folks would say. And I think that these conversations need to be had amongst all Black families, because then what then happens after Tulsa roughly is the beginning from the 1920s through the 70s of the Great Migration. For those who don't know what that is, that's basically where a lot of Black people migrated from the South to the North to the Midwest and to the West, where there was like, okay, there are no opportunities in the South. So then people have to ask with common sense, why were there no opportunities in the South? After Reconstruction?
Hold it. No, because look, we can keep going down this road. We're going to play a couple of songs for them. And when we come back, we're going to hop in with Reconstruction. And just so you guys understand, Reconstruction was the period pretty much directly after Tulsa. And before we go to Reconstruction, when we come back, I do want to touch on Red Summer a little bit, just so that they understand that Tulsa, Rosewood were not one-off events. This was a countrywide culture that was happening and being allowed to happen. So y'all, we're gonna play a little music. You know what? I'm gonna play some Gap Band, because you know why? You know why.
Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
Exactly. Gap Band is a Tulsa. If you guys didn't know what the Gap and Gap Band was, it was for Greenwood and Archer, which were the anchor streets in Black Wall Street. So I'm gonna play some Gap Band right now, because that's the vibe we're on. We're gonna play a couple of songs, and then we'll be right back, and we're gonna dig right in and pick up a Reconstruction, and also just touch on a few of those other situations that are a little less known than Tulsa, but were very similar in nature. Supporters of this show can join us on Patreon, where for only $5 a month, you can access all past shows and exclusive content. Join now at patreon.com/SolseiCo. That's patreon.com/SOLSEICO. Want to answer one of our questions, or have a song or artist request, or do you just want to leave us some feedback? Call the New Soul Radio voicemail at 312-945-6376. That's 312-945-6376. Remember, we may play your message on air. Every time I come back mid-interview, this is like, and it's not just you. Like, Nizm, understand it's not just you. I did the same thing with Dr. Garrett. I'm probably going to do the same thing on the next show. I get all tongue-tied and flustered. But you know, that's good. You want to know why?
Why?
Because I keep having these in-depth conversations, and y'all be taking my little breath away, and I'll be, oh my God. So y'all catch me off guard, but it's a good thing. Guys, for those of you who are just tuning in, I'm here with Nizm. We are discussing Black business, but we're not discussing Black business in the way that you often hear it. We're often talking about Black business from a modern place and a modern standpoint, and we're going the other direction, and we're going from history on forward. We started talking in regards to the Reconstruction period, which was right after we were freed as slaves. well, that was a whole gradual process, but you guys know our history. But right after that period, we were talking and we started with the phase of Reconstruction. We touched on Tulsa and we talked about Black Wall Street. If you did miss that and you want to catch it, guys, make sure you follow my social media so you can go ahead and get on the Patreon, because that's the only way you can get these full interviews in entirety after the show has aired. So if you missed the interview, don't worry, pick up, listen now, but go ahead and hop on Patreon and get the rest of the interview. So we're picking up and we were going to talk about now the Great Migration. And the Great Migration was when a lot of African Americans from the South decided there's nothing here for me and decided to move north. And that's why a lot of times we can say, where your people from? Your people from Mississippi, your people from here, your people from there. Nizm and I are from Chicago. And we can say that even here, you can talk to people and know where you're like, oh, your people from Arkansas too? Okay. Because we were not born here, we migrated here. So dig in and jump in and give me this talk about the Great Migration and have fun, boo. Go ahead.
Sure. So the Great Migration, as you mentioned, it was a great segue into that, is a lot of Black folk leaving the South. One of the things that motivated people to move was opportunity, because again, people realized that I can't succeed here. Economics has always been the root of this country, as I mentioned before. Contrary to popular belief, Abraham Lincoln, for instance, did not free Black people because it was the moral thing to do. It was to keep the Union together.
You mean Honest Abe didn't free us because he loved us?
No. In fact, Abraham Lincoln himself commissioned a study to see if he could send Black folks back to Africa. It was just entirely too costly. Now, the reason he is viewed as such a great president, if you can take that out of it, is because he did what he could to keep the Union of the United States together. That's what made him that. As a Black person, I wrestle with that, but that's just me.
And I know a lot of listeners here are wrestling with that, and they're also wrestling with their understanding of what history was and what you just told them, and you just burst their little bubbles.
Well, yeah, I'm going to continue to pop bubbles because I'm just in that kind of mood today. So one of the things people don't think about is economics in this country, that the Civil War was a war of economics. So the South produced tobacco, sugar, cotton, all these things that they were selling to the world, and it was free labor. The North did not produce anything but the Constitution. Mm-hmm. So you then move into the Industrial Revolution where things are becoming modernized.
Right.
So you're saying, well, why did you go backwards, and how does that relate to the Great Migration? With the Industrial Revolution coming in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, cars, factories, things like that. Now the agrarian culture of farming and things is being now automated. Now Black people move to the North for new opportunities
so that they could work in these factories and be a part of this new revolution that was happening.
Because there are a lot of people, including my father. My father passed in last year in 2020. He lived to be 67. My father chopped cotton in the 20th century.
Wow. Your dad was on, listen, 67 is young.
Yeah.
He I need y'all to put this in perspective. Mm-hmm. He was not born in 18 nothing.
Right.
He chopped cotton now.
So his father was born in 1903, and his father was probably a slave.
Right.
So when people say get over it, when you can think that literally we're only talking 3, maybe 4 generations ago.
Maybe. Yeah.
So the Great Migration is an opportunity for African Americans to start over because the South is flourishing with Jim Crow and things and so on and so forth. Moving forward to roughly 1929 through the 30s, we have the Great Depression. The Great Depression, for those who don't know, the economy basically went in the toilet. It impacted completely. And it impacted everyone. But of course, Black people feel the brunt of it more than others. Now,
welcome to now.
You're right. One of the things that a lot of Black people may not know is the reason why we vote programmatically Democratic is because of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, who created the New Deal. The New Deal
And
was
it's so
basically
funny you say that because a lot of Black people don't know historically Black people voted Republican.
Republican. Exactly. From Lincoln up until FDR, we voted Republican.
Republican,
The
yeah.
Republican Party was built on pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps because the government, as we had seen in earlier cases afterward, did not help Black people.
Right. Obviously.
Right. So that's how we get there now. So we move through the Depression. Black people now get a few scraps. So now the country's trying to come back together. Unfortunately, the economic engine of war brought the United States out of the Depression. This is a fact. World War II starts 1939, technically, with the assassination of the Czechoslovakian prime minister. And then Hitler does what he does. We're brought into the war in 1941. When the war effort begins, most soldiers, most of the men are abroad. So now the factories are run by the women. So if you see that old school picture of the lady with the arm muscle,
Rosie the Riveter.
Exactly. That's where that came from. Yet still, we had not integrated into the army. Even though we fought in the Civil War.
I was just going to say, we fought in the war. Let's be clear.
Yeah, we did. But after the Civil War, we did not fight again until World War II. And the only reason that we fought in the Civil War is because the North was smart. You got a group of people that know the lay of the land, give them a uniform so they can go back and fight. That was just good war strategy.
Mm-hmm. That was just common sense.
You didn't need to go to West Point to figure that out. Okay. So we get through World War II. Truman integrates the army. So that gets into the Tuskegee Airmen and then touches into things like the Tuskegee experiment, which is the reason why Black people do not trust vaccines.
That's why we're not going to get vaccinated right now.
Now, I'm going to dispel that myth really quickly. One of the things that was formed after the Tuskegee experiment is called the National Institute of Health. A lot of people, like I hear CDC, I hear all these things like that. The importance of NIH is that, for instance, in my PhD research, I have to be certified for them before I do any research. And all I did was interviews. If I did not get certified, then all my research would be null and void. So after Tuskegee, the NIH was created to make sure that people were not harmed as research subjects ever again. So if you're dealing with kids or like prison populations or certain distressed populations, there's more things you have to go through before you can legally do research.
That you can even do anything.
Before
that adds a level of comfort. And y'all, I really want to pause, insert. For the people who are not vaccinated, and this is their basis, I really want you to listen to what he said. There are avenues and things in place to ensure our safety.
And then on a counter conspiratory bias level, and I'm going to make
counter conspiratory bias. Yeah, he said, y'all, his dissertation coming out.
Most folks say, I'm not going to take the shot because they're going to kill me. Mm-hmm. Well, for y'all listening, you ain't Malcolm X. You ain't Marcus Garvey. You ain't Martin Luther King. Number two, capitalism keeps this country running. There's no reason that they would kill that many Black people because Black people are the biggest consumers.
The money. Even with the companies that they own. Yeah.
You're killing your money. Do you know what would happen if the cure didn't work and killed that many Black people? Who gonna buy the Jordans?
It would be economic collapse.
So I say that to not say, if you don't take it, that's fine. But Black people play a huge part in the economic stability of this country even today. So
we have to, I want to pin that because here's the thing. There's a lot of us, even to this minute. I understood there was, of course, we have power, but there's so much power in who we are. We hold so much power. And when we understand the power that we hold, there are certain things that we wouldn't necessarily be afraid of. And when you put it into that perspective and you say it like that, if I hadn't been vaccinated, which I have, y'all, I'm advocating go get vaccinated. But if I hadn't been vaccinated, I think my mindset would definitely begin to shift.
So I put it to you this way, for anyone that doubts what I said. If you think the vaccination is BS, why are they pushing so hard to get people back into sports arenas?
Because it's money. They want to fill Madison Square Garden up again. They want to get Lollapalooza popping again. They want all of these things because when we're at home, we're comfortable, but baby, ain't nobody making money but Jeff Bezos or Amazon.
Money. Nobody making money. I just wanted to tie that part of Tuskegee into today and then come back around. All right. So now we're roughly at the 50s. The 50s, you get the beginning and the development of suburbia. So now the war vets are coming home. And then from the Great Migration, you have now the introduction of public housing on a mass scale.
Whew. And we from Chicago. That's a whole conversation.
Exactly. So
us.
Now the people that were in the slums and the rough areas now have begun this term you may have heard called white flight.
I am well aware of what white flight is. I'm going to give you an example. Look, we're going to give them a little music and we're going to come right back because I'm going to come back and I'm going to give you an example, a real life example of white flight. And then we're going to talk about how what happened, this example in the 90s is just repetitive of what continued to happen over and over and over again. Y'all, we are having a ball going over this history, and it's so funny because I know y'all are listening going, because that's the feelings that we're having. So y'all, we will be right back. This is Kim Brio. You are listening to Gems and Jams, and for the sake of it, I'm probably gonna play a Gap Band song again because I got enough of them in the repertoire right now. So I'm probably gonna play a Gap Band song again, but we will be back and we're gonna hop right in. We're gonna start talking about that mid-century area, and we're gonna talk about specifically white flight when we get back, and then we're gonna bring it all up to present time.
Take New Soul Radio with you wherever you go. Download the New Soul Radio app in the Google Play or Apple App Store by searching New Soul Radio. That's NUSOL Radio. If you have what it takes to host your own radio show, hit us up at teamsolsei.com and drop your info. That's teamsolsei.com.
SOLSEI. Solsei.
This is America.
Peace on left, justice on the right. Peace on left, justice on the right.
This is America.
This is the reason Kaepernick was taking a knee.
Heartbroken when I saw that video. I almost couldn't finish it.
Abuse of power.
We gotta start making changes.
There's a virus in police departments across this country.
If I ruled the world,
Cops harassing.
Good cops know who these bad cops are.
free all my sons.
You have every right to be angry.
Can you tell me why? Every time I step outside, I see my die.
You have no right to perpetrate violence on the very communities that you are standing up for.
A lot of people have been using my father's words.
That all men are created equal.
The only pathway to do this is through nonviolent means.
I'm letting you know that it ain't no gun they make that can kill my soul.
We will bring you justice, I promise.
But if God got us, then we gon' be alright.
Start making some changes.
Imagine that this radio spot is about your business.
It's easier than you think.
Text 630-465-5742 to get started. That's 630-465-5742.
I am here with Nizm. And honey, we have been having us a conversation about Black business today. And it's not the conversation that you would think, y'all. We're not talking about Black business right now and how, look, you know all the Black business conversations about how horrible this is and we got to do better in customs. No, we taking it back. We're getting historical and we're talking about the history of Black business and we're bringing it forward so that we can understand the state of Black business now. So if you've missed the interview previously, listen from here on out, but make sure you go ahead and go to the Patreon so that you can listen to the entire episode. So before we left, you talked about white flight and you said you guys are probably familiar with a little white flight. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story for you and let you just have fun with that and then hop in and tell me how that happened over and over in the past.
Sure.
I'm from Chicago, like you, Nizm. We Chicago. I know that this is worldwide and you guys are listening everywhere. We're from Chicago. And I was on the South Side, you know, that's where I was born and raised, and mom and daddy said, we're going to move our baby to the suburbs. We want her to have a good school and we want all of that. So they moved me to Matson. And we moved to Matson in 1990. And my parents have great jobs. They're well off. We built our home from the ground up. And we were we were happy to be in Matson. By the time I was in second grade, there was one white kid in my class. I got there when I was in kindergarten.
Okay. Wow.
To the point where 60 Minutes did an actual episode on the white flight in Matson. And they literally fled to Frankfurt, which was like 2 miles down the road. Mm-hmm. Literally. But they just didn't want to have any black neighbors. And I can remember watching the episode of 60 Minutes as a child and pointing, oh my God, mom and dad, that's our house on the TV. But it was so dynamic because as an adult looking back being a part of and being in the middle of it and being able to have friends that at the beginning of my elementary school career, I had white friends. And by the time I got to 8th grade, there were none. Mm-hmm. Mm. That was my personal experience with white flight.
Yours is not unique.
When it first started happening.
So white flight begins to really take hold in Chicago and in other cities, roughly, let's say the late 50s and early 60s. Specific to Chicago, there's also this term redlining. Redlining originates in Chicago. Oh, wow. So there was a time that if you were in Chicago and you were black, even when you came up during Great Migration, there was literally a outlined area where you only could be if you were black. That included Bronzeville, what we call the low end, I think up until 63rd. So you look at the segregation of the city in Chicago, cities like Chicago and Miami.
We still living in the
expressways. Yeah. Chicago, Miami, and other cities use highways to divide them. So for example, in the case of Miami, there's an area called Overtown, which is a predominantly black community. Highway I-95 cuts the neighborhood up. In the case of Chicago, the Dan Ryan splits Bronzeville from Bridgeport. Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know what that means, Bridgeport is a predominantly historically white Irish neighborhood where the Sox Stadium is. Exactly. And we still had racist incidents as late as 1997 with the beating of Leonard Clark.
You still have them now, to be frank. I was about to rent some commercial space and the owner was like, don't come by yourself at night.
Exactly. Bronzeville, ergo the name, is a historically black neighborhood, although it's lightening up, but historically has been an area where many black people came from. So white flight now becomes, with civil rights in some of the far south neighborhoods like Auburn, Gresham, Roseland, Chatham, all these neighborhoods used to be white, and white folks start leaving. So that's white flight of them going into the suburbs. And then this is why a lot of our grandmas and grandpas got their first houses in the late 50s to the late 60s on the far south side.
Oh my God. Okay.
Now,
and I'm only saying it like that because it makes so much sense as we as black people here from Chicago. This is the story that we always get, and they all got their property around, and I never thought about it like that, but they all got their houses around the same time in the same areas where they're at.
And most of them also got their houses because the West Side was never properly redeveloped after the King riots.
Wow.
So if you go, there's parts of Madison to this day you can
see that are still desolate.
That are still desolate. Correct. Mm-hmm. So now you get to white flight. So now post civil rights, we've had the era of assassination from Kennedy to King to Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, and now our parents' generation believed change was on the horizon. Right now we can vote, we can do all these things. Enter the 70s. The 70s, with the free love of music, began to introduce deregulation. Deregulation, for those who don't understand or know, I personally want to tell you, but I really want you to look that up. Deregulation, for instance.
You got to tell them you got to tell them on here.
Study to show self-approval. Go find it yourself. I don't want to sound that smart. Go look it up yourself. But to give context of what deregulation means, it literally the name certain industries were regulated. You could only do certain things. So when you make it a free market, that changes the dynamic of it. Another thing happens in the 70s is we leave the gold standard. What that means is up until then, every United States dollar was backed by a piece of gold. A lot of people don't know that. That's why
I did not know that.
Yes, we are no longer behind the gold standard. We then move into something that gets real dangerous: credit. So now in the 70s, you start to see
gives me anxiety.
Right. You start to see these major cities like your steel mills, your Garys, your Pittsburghs, your Detroits. They're starting to wane now because of deregulation. Or now we can send the labor to other countries because it's cheaper. So those people that came up in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, back in the day, you didn't worry about college because you had a trade. You come in, you could work 25 years and get a good job, which is how a lot of our grandparents got the houses they got. So then they can go then start their own businesses. And at this point, we still had a culture amongst African Americans in our community that, hey, so-and-so own that, we're going to go support them. So-and-so owns this. And we did this for all businesses, not just churches. So you had multiple businesses that we supported. We're in the 70s now. Now we get into the 80s. Crack pops up. So people are losing jobs. The steel mills are gone. All the good jobs are gone. And crack comes into the fray. One thing that people don't understand about drug dealing is no one wakes up and wants to be Pablo Escobar. Survival of the fittest kicks in. This drug comes into the area and people like, hey, people are buying it. Hey, whatever I need to do to support myself. Yeah. So now that devastates starting from LA and makes its way eastward. All right. So then our neighborhoods, we start to see the advent of the drive-by shooting. The gang culture had changed. And for a lot of people that don't know, the gang culture in Chicago is not what you think it is. If you know the history of these original street organizations, they're called street organizations for a reason.
This is not organized crime. Let's be clear what's happening here. These kids don't even understand the history of what they're a part of. And there's factions fighting with factions where these institutions, and I'm using that word on purpose, used to be to protect the community. They were not to torture the community.
So now with drug addiction and violence, the neighborhoods are now further going down. So in cases of the West Side, for instance, that never recovered 20 years prior from the King riots, now you got further depression. Now, the older parents who bought the houses in the 60s and 70s, they're now 50s and 60s. Now they're now being held hostage by the gang members that are their grandkids. So you start to see a rise in crime, and you start to see patterns of crime on, for instance, the South Side, 79th, 87th, 69th, 63rd.
All these numbers that we know to get your butt on and off of that street.
Exactly. So the 80s then pivot into the 90s, and then now we get into modern era, internet, things like that. Interestingly enough, President Biden had a hand in writing the crime bill that helped the 3 strikes rule, which is why Biden is trying to make it up to black people today.
So hard.
But I digress.
Which is also why he had Kamala. He has to get Kamala back, because Kamala, if y'all remember, when they were adversaries, Kamala was not here for Joe.
At all. So if you think about everything I've set up until this point, we're in the 90s. Where are the businesses? So now the businesses are withering away, and now you see today's businesses in African American communities, where the predominant business that is growing in the African American community is the church, the large church that is supplemented by smaller churches, the check cashing place because of the saving and loans industry in the 80s. So there's only one black bank in Chicago to this day, which is Seaway. Correct. So black things are disappearing in black neighborhoods. Now you have other groups coming in. So
we don't own the Subways. We don't own the Dunkin' Donuts. We don't own the gas stations. We
own none of it.
None of it.
We own none of it. Have you ever tried to start a business in Chinatown and not been China of Chinese?
It's not gonna happen.
Ain't gonna happen. No money gonna allow it to happen.
Nope.
So now we have the hair shop, the chicken spot, the churches, the cash check spot. So when you go in black neighborhoods, you don't have proper things to sustain them. So everybody wants to do the same thing. So now we're in the 90s. We're getting through, not over, the crack epidemic. Right. And now the old parents who bought the houses that I mentioned in the 50s and 60s are now 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they're dying off. And guess what the kids do? Sell the house.
Sell the house. I was just about to, you better stop preaching. Look, we're going to give them music real quick and we're going to come back up because that's the biggest thing. And I really need y'all to understand what we as a society, what we as a society, what we as a Black community are doing when we take these things that we have inherited from our mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, and we sell them for monetary value that is never worth what it's worth. And now we're sitting in communities where they're food deserts and there are all of these things. But I also want to say, Nizm, I'm going to say this. Mm-hmm. I thought you was talking about now when you said everybody wanted to start the same business, because I wish we would start starting some supermarkets and some other businesses, but Black people only want to, sell hair and do the same things.
It ain't that we don't want to start a supermarket, but most Black people don't even understand or have awareness of the supply chain because there aren't no Black farmers because Monsanto and everybody else got the farm.
They took over it. Y'all, we about to play some music. We're going to play some music because we are having real talk. Make sure that you hang on. Stay tuned. If you did miss the beginning of the interview, again, go and follow me on social media at I am Kim Brio. That's IAMKIMBRIO. You'll be able to find the Patreon link so you can listen to this interview in its entirety because, baby, if you came in late, you definitely want to hear the beginning too.
Want 24/7 access to past shows?
Exclusive content
and VIP on-air opportunities? Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Solsei. That's SOLSEICO.
Solsei.
Want more dope content? Check out Solsei's YouTube by searching Solsei on that Solsei Chicago. Starting a business? Grab Kim Brio's free brand identity checklist to remove the chaos around DIY in your brand. Get it free at kimbrio.com/checklist. That's Kim Brio. BRIO.com/checklist.
It's so amazing to me how my shows that I've had thus far, I've had two totally different guests, two totally different topics, but a lot of the things have overlapped in regards to us really just understanding the trauma, the Black trauma, and understanding how to get out of that and how to move forward. Now, today, I've been talking with Nizm, and we have been talking about Black business, and we have not been talking about Black business in today's current form. We have talked about Black business and carried it all the way forward from Reconstruction, and we're almost here. We're almost now. We stopped talking, and we were in the 90s, right? So we were right about here. So I really want him to have fun in regards to talking about now and tying in how a lot of the things that we spoke about in the interview previously, how they tie into now and why things are the way that they are now. And a lot of the things that we quote unquote complain about in regards to Black business. Let's make sense of it and understand where it came from. So before we left Nizm, we were talking about, Lord, what was we talking about? I feel like we've been talking about
housing and selling of the houses and why.
And that's what it was. The other thing too, where when you go to these Black communities, none of the businesses in the community that serve that community are Black owned.
Correct. That is correct.
And we were really talking about that. So I'm gonna just hand you the mic and let you go at it. I'll jump in when need be.
Sure. So we talked about that, and we ended with, at the moment of, we sell the houses that our grandmas and grandfathers fought for. It was buying equity into the neighborhood, but it was also wealth generational.
Yeah.
But a lot of us sell it because it's short money, or now we just done with the hood because the neighborhood that started off as
Has
a beacon and a
declined.
bastion has declined.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, a lot of folks don't realize the show Good Times was about Cabrini Green, but there was a time when moving into Cabrini Green
Was an honor. Mm-hmm.
It was a big deal. And then that was destroyed in 2004 because of so many other things that happened. Now
That's a whole show in itself.
Exactly. So now we move into the to the 2000s. Now, if you are born in the late 70s to the mid 80s, here's what you have seen with your eyes in your lifetime. You were told to go to school, to get education, to get a good job. Okay, fair. So if you were about 18 to 25, there was a bubble that happened in 2000, the first tech bubble. That's when the internet and stuff start taking off. Tech bubble pops. Then a few months later, 9/11
happens.
Destroys the economy for at least 3 to 4 years, right?
Yeah.
There's a time, people, that you could walk into an airport and there was no such thing as TSA.
Oh, really?
Who thought? All right, now we move through to the later part of the 2000s. Barack Obama comes along, first black president, but at another economic collapse point because of what the banks did with a lot of mortgages. So without getting technical with CDOs and swaps, people were trading trash with trash. So banks were literally too big to fail. You had to prop them up, and they showed you how they felt 12 years later. So all these things have happened, and now we get to today. January, February, March of 2020, COVID-19. COVID has run rampant on the country. I don't need to say how and why. The government then initiates the PPP program to help businesses and things.
Oh, please talk to him and talk to me, because this PPP thing has been rubbing me the wrong way.
First off, most of it is not free money. It's a loan. There's a difference between loans and grants.
Understand that, y'all.
Loans and grants are different. If you went to school, you know that too. There's a difference between the Pell Grant and the loan.
Exactly, because I got to pay some back.
That's why you got to pay back, right? Then in the case of the PPP loans, what people don't know is that if you got a PPP loan from the United States government, we can find your information publicly
right now,
where you live and how much money you got. So
we could screenshot, we could pull it up and share it on the screen right now. People do not understand that. They do not know.
I know people who works in very vestiges of government who have shared with me literally addresses of people where it's like, yo, this is what these people are getting. So now what people don't understand is the detriment of when you take a PPP loan and don't use it. You're making it acceptable in future times for Black people who are real entrepreneurs to not get money.
Ooh, okay, stop. Because I want to. Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. I want to put a pin on that because I want to go down this rabbit hole with you. Personally, a moment ago when I said the PPP loan rubbed me the wrong way, right? Quick snapshot, and I know my story is a lot of Black entrepreneur stories that I know a lot of business friends in my circle where we've been in business for a long time. Anybody who knows my story, I've been in business since I was 12, literally, right? So if the PPP loan come along, I'm thinking this was made for me. Okay. I was denied. And a lot of my counterparts in business who actually run businesses were denied. However, I wish y'all could see my little finger. However, how many people do we know who got that 10 stacks and made up a business, ain't had a business yet, ain't spent it, and got approved? Can you talk to me about how and why that happened?
Personal opinion and the views expressed by Nizm L. David Stewart do not represent any entity that I work for and am affiliated with. I have
Perfect.
to get
this is what I wanted you to say because I know where you're going.
A lot of these loan people, it was a hustle for them to get the money. But here's what people don't understand. If you really run a business, you wouldn't do this. If you get $10,000 from the government, you got to report that. And the next year, or at the latest the year after that, you're going to have to justify that. So in theory, the PPP loan was for payroll, helping, sustain your business.
Your employees.
I myself have 2 businesses in the state of Illinois, 3 in the state of Florida.
Right.
I did not touch the PPP law because I knew where it was going to go. I've been blessed to know people who work for the Internal Revenue Service. And I want y'all to listen closely what I'm about to tell y'all. The IRS has had a hiring freeze, hiring blitz for a new group of people who gonna just hunt down people with PPP loans. Now, when I say hunt down people, let me be clear.
Woo!
There is a division of the IRS called forensic accountants. These are accountants with pistols. That's how they got Al Capone, taxes. Play with the government money if you want to.
If you want to.
But here's the detriment of this. When people do that, and I know other organizations who've gotten money who are black that have manipulated the money and mismanaged it, you make it hard for future generations because then the government can then say, see what happened when we gave black people money?
Exactly. That's the part I wanted you to say.
That hurts because the next little girl, next little boy that really wants to do something, or the next true entrepreneur is now hindered because not only did you take this money, you showed this money on Facebook. You showed how you balled out. And see, what people don't understand, because if you ran a business, you would notice you can't yield $10,000 of income all year and got a Mercedes-Benz.
It don't work like that.
That's not
1 + 1 don't equal 37, y'all.
So when you use money from the government, or if you just have a basic account, you need to give account for what you made and what you lost and things and so on and so forth. But a lot of people turn that money into a quick come up. And without getting into details, I know for a fact in certain suburbs in the south side of Chicago, it's hundreds of people who got this money times 10,000 and have done nothing with it.
That was my question for you. Talk to me now. We talked about, we touched on those businesses who took the money and didn't do what they were supposed to do with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about those people who, because me and you know these people who started businesses for this, really don't have businesses. Do you understand what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean, because everybody was spouting the letters LLC.
Oh my God. As an LLC is what a business. Oh, Jesus.
Trust me.
I'm so glad me and you are on the same page, because if I saw one more LLC t-shirt, don't get a LLC with your...
Well, first off, most people don't realize that a LLC stands for Limited Liability Corporation.
And that's one form of a business.
Right. There's sole proprietorship, LLC, so on and so forth.
That's Corp, C Corps, LLPs, etc.
If you want to develop a business properly, talk to me through the proper channels. I'm not giving that much free game away. I've done enough of that today. That said, if you're starting a business, it's more than just an LLC. You have to do things like an EIN and proper formation of the organization. And it's not that hard, but you need to do it properly. So here's where I tie everything together. If you're in a neighborhood that has been economically blighted and downtrodden, and you took this money and you still only got churches, hair spots, chicken spots, and all that, you're doing a severe disservice to the neighborhood. Because you know why? Because I can go into any other neighborhood and I can see an architect's window. I'm looking for a black marine biologist. No, all I see is, as my dad say, a black man handling a basketball like a monkey handle a coconut.
Yeah.
Rapper's delight.
Yeah.
And dope boys. So if you're gonna do it, emulate the people who were dope boys and flipped it. The Kennedys became presidents, and all they did, bootlegging liquor, and they legitimized it.
And they did not just all go to Walmart and blow their money, y'all.
That is the beautiful thing of true free market capitalism. You got an opportunity to clean it up, and especially
in today's world with the digital world. You can start businesses online. You can drop ship and not even have products and have a whole business selling products that you don't even hold inventory for.
So one of the things that I personally predict is that in 2022, it's going to be a higher amount of arrests for fraud with the government. And what people need to think about is that if the world truly opens up, the IRS is coming. IRS, SEC, all the alphabet boys.
With their jackets on, and they are not sitting behind the desk. They coming to your
No,
house. They on your
coming to your door.
Facebook. They on
And
your
y'all make it
Instagram. They on
easy.
your Snapchat.
All that. So the PPP loan I know a lot of success stories. So let me be clear. Not all of them are bad, but I've heard so many things where people got someone to be like, I'll get you a loan, then I'm gonna cut me in on 1,000 of it. I'm gonna get you 2 or 3 loans. So now you got this $20,000, but you got to be held accountable for it. What did you do with it? So in one of my businesses as a photographer, I got a loan years ago. And before I did that, I had to give account of what I'm going to do with it.
Yep.
Cover that, like make it make sense. So for
and
you
they
to
think
get
this is free money, and they think that they're not going to have to account for.
Right. And this is a great time to start a business for whatever reason. But if you really want to help your community, then genuinely help the community.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't take this money out and then go blow it going wherever and then wonder what happens. Because one of the funniest stories I saw on social media was a young lady got a PPP loan, blew the money, and then had the audacity to have a GoFundMe because she needed to pay it back because the feds was on her head. You can't make this up.
I wish y'all could see my face. We could see each other. Nizm and I could see each other, but y'all on the radio.
I had the same face you had. I was like, the audacity. But it's a lot of people that think this is a game, and as someone that does business consulting and business development, I almost weep at the thought, because as the world opens up, whenever that officially comes, and another round of this, or if there's even another round of PPP money,
which it may be,
analysts are going to look at where the money went the first time.
Yep.
What did the money do? So you know what? That makes it harder for legitimate businesses
to get it. Yeah. Because I'm transparently, the second go round, they sent me an invitation to apply. I wasn't even going to apply because the first time they denied me and I got an attitude and I was like, you ain't going to tell me.
Well, twice. Right. Exactly.
All these businesses I'm running, I'm paying $600 a month in business expenses and you don't want to give me nothing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And this second time around, they invited me to apply and still said I didn't make it. And that's because the criteria is getting harder. And it's going to continue to get harder the more that people misuse the opportunity.
So to bring everything I've talked about in full bloom, we went from slavery, where we were forced upon a land to till, given skills, use those skills well, to the point that people destroyed the community, moved again, tried to use those skills again, went through civil rights and everything else, crack epidemic and everything else, and now with technology, all you want to do is hit a lick.
And scam and stuff.
My thing is, if you can scam, you can run a business. You know?
That's my thing. It takes so much brain power to do the illegal things that are being done that they don't understand. Just an ounce of that brain power, you could run a business and be killing it.
Starting a business? Kimbrio's 30-day brand takeover is for you. Get your new website, marketing plan, social media strategy, and all of the training you need in just 30 days. Apply now to see if you qualify for Kimbrio's 30-day brand takeover at www.30daybrandtakeover.com.
Starting a business? Grab Kimbrio's free brand identity checklist to remove the chaos around DIY in your brand. Get it free at kimbrio.com/checklist. That's Kimbrio. BRIO.com/checklist.
And I want to speak to the parents and grandparents of my scammers.
Speak up a little. Make sure they can hear.
Because this is something that, if people catch on to, is a game changer. If you know anybody that is a card cracker or anything, or a hacker like that, go and get you a cybersecurity certificate and get paid to do it legally. This country has been under cyber attack. That's how Target and all that. The money that people make in cyber defense
is crazy.
Insane. When you look at movies like Live Free or Die Hard, it kind of give you a little illusion about it. This country finds little Johnny, who's a little hacker, and be like, tell you what, little Johnny gonna do fair time, or Johnny can come work for us.
Right.
And as Black people, we're creative. So use that as a legitimate skill. You know what I'm saying? we're always innovating. A lot of people don't know lottery was founded in Chicago. Old folks called it policy. The policy racket. The policy racket evolved and then was created and then turned into lotto that we have today.
I need to pause because I want to repeat what you just said. Mm-hmm. Because I have a lot of older listeners. Of course, I'm on America's Home for Old School and Dusties. So I got a lot of older listeners. But what I do also know is that they're aware. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are aware of their grandkids, their great grandkids, their sons, their neighborhood, whatever, who are doing these things. Mm-hmm. And they just sit back. And I think that part of it is fear. We've definitely terrorized our elders. You know what I'm saying? I don't know any other way to say it. But if you can begin to pour into them, just like he said, tell them how much money they will make a year doing cybersecurity. Just look it up, go to glassdoor.com. Tell them how much they will make a year doing cybersecurity. And they say, well, what is that? It's exactly what you do now.
Right, exactly.
And you won't go to jail.
Exactly.
I need you guys to hear that. And let's start leading. A big problem, and a big problem of what's going on with our youth, in my opinion, is that we're afraid to lead them. We've gotten so afraid of them that we just sit back and whatever they're going to do, just let them do it.
Yeah.
I don't care how much they fuss, cuss. I don't care if they flash the guns, y'all. We have to be aware and lead them in a direction, because right now we're letting them lead themselves into the wilderness.
And expose them to different things.
Yeah.
One of the things I also tell people is expose your kids to museums and different things like that. Let them see, like right now, I'm super hyped at the young lady, Miss Avant-Garde, who won the spelling bee. I was in the spelling bee as a shorty. I remember the word I screwed up on, abundant. Man,
everybody remembers the word they messed up on, don't they?
Never forget.
I do.
But let them see that you too can do this, because the narrative is often limited to just sports and entertainment. Or if you're going to go down that route, don't just look at LeBron James, look at Rich Paul, be the agent,
And look at more than the basketball that they do, because they do way more than that.
Way more than that. If you want to be an entertainer, look at the people who own stuff. And the history of business in this country, as I've covered, is so much more that, of course, I couldn't cover everything. But even if you look at the Motowns and what the Berry Gordys had to go through just to compete with Capitol Records and everything else.
Yeah.
We're a people who overcome and innovate. If we don't do nothing else, we overcome and we innovate. My fear, though, is we rest on our laurels, and you can't just hit a lick. We got to get out the grind culture. We got to get out of it.
The quick money culture.
It goes back to that generational wealth. The simplest things you can do is get life insurance, get a house. And my thing is, even for my dope boys out there, if that's the life you're going to lead, then just get a policy on yourself.
Just get a policy on yourself and buy the house and the property so that you got some that you leaving to them.
I'm just saying, if you're going to go out like that, don't put everybody else in jeopardy. Let them have something afterward.
Yeah.
But we're so busy looking at short-term money, and I've been guilty of it too, that get into what wealth means. So for me, the reason I've started multiple businesses, I already have a will. Yes, Black people, get your own will before you get sick.
Right. You're in your 40s and you have a will, as you should. We're not supposed to wait till we on our deathbed and pull an Aretha, and now they looking for pieces of paper with our handwritten. We're not supposed to do that, y'all.
Ooh, have that in place. My family, between my nephew, my sister, myself, we have things in place that are for our next generation, for my niece and for my great nephew. Like, these are the things that my parents didn't know how to do. My grandma, when she died, said, I'm taking the house with me. My dad didn't want the house. If he takes the house, I don't become homeless 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the things that we need to think about, that, even if we don't want the house, keep it in the family. To this day, me and my sister and my nephew are trying to buy back that house because it's sentimental value. And we just want it because my grandma had that house from 69 to 05. So everything I'm telling you is real time, even to me.
Yeah, and even as we look at other cultures and how they operate and how they support each other, like you said, even if you don't want to live in a crib, keep the crib to keep it in the family. Put a renter in there until it's needed. You know what I mean? Because here's the other thing too, and you touched on it. I'm just gonna mention it. Black people got a real quick way of putting our kids out the house and not supporting them. You 18, you gotta go. And then we're in our 20s and we're homeless and we're this, that, and the third, whereas other cultures give their children the opportunity to grow, learn, a place to be, etc. That enables them to do that. Like even with myself, bluntly, I'm grown, but without my parents' support, I would not be able to be in business for myself full time.
Yeah, I can see that. And in my case, my mom passed when I was 23 while I was in grad school. Pops passed last year. Grandma passed the year after my mom passed. But I've often, as I got older, was like, yo, if we would have kept that house, it's so much more I wouldn't have had to deal with. Yeah. You know, so me and my sister talk regularly about like generational wealth, about why it's so important. You know, we just want to put things in place that, you know, my niece who's 16, she ain't ever got to go through that.
She don't have to worry about where she gonna live.
Even down as a photographer, I have things broken out in certain ways that if and when I become what I'm going to become as a photographer, money is going to stay in the family. We good. Right. We not selling it all off. You know what I'm saying? We keeping some things in the tub. And these are the conversations that we need to be having now, because those of us in our 30s or 40s, these are the wealth building years. Kick it, go to brunch, do all that, but put something away or come up with a business that, you know what, when this takes off, this is going to keep the family
sustained. Correct.
You know what I'm saying? Because that is why the Tulsas were formed in the first place, because they saw what their parents went through and they were like, let's not do that.
We're not going to do that again.
The whole reason why a lot of them then came up north was we saw what our parents went through. Let's not do that again. So it's a theme that we keep seeing that now we're breaking in a negative way because it's all about me, 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 me. And if you got kids, nieces, nephews, you need to be thinking about them now, because the world that they're going to come up in, don't hang your hat on reparations. Don't hang your hat on reparations.
No, that's done.
Because how people are handling the PPP loan is a justification for not giving reparations. Yep. And when I say that to people, they cringe. And people ask, well, how can you say that? Well, you can say, well, if they can't handle this money,
they can handle $10,000. What are we gonna give them? XYZ amount?
And if anybody wants to figure out the amount of money that each Black person should get for reparation, I'll give you a very relatively simple formula. 40 acres and a mule in 1865 multiply for compound inflation from 1865 to today. Which I don't even want to tell you that amount of.
Come on, man.
So imagine hypothetically, and I'm just going to say hypothetically again, each Black person is owed $5 to $10 million.
That's crazy. We will kill ourselves.
40 acres and a mule, 40 acres of land. So let me give people a scale of land, because I'm speaking in terms of Chicago. If you've ever been to the rink in Chicago and that parking lot in the back, that's an acre.
That's 1 acre.
That's 1 acre. So 40 acres and a form of transportation. Take that from 1865, multiply that and compound the inflation from 1865 to today. Do you realize how much money that would be for each of us? But me and my dad used to joke about this. He was like, well, first thing the niggas are going to do is go buy a Cadillac and get them some chicken.
Exactly.
They're going to give them some gold. So they're going to spend about 80% of it beforehand. But here's the irony of it, though. If people really wanted to turn the economy around, give Black people money because they're not going to save. I'm going to say that again. Give Black people money because they're not going to save. Everyone knows the alleged numbers that it takes. What? A Black dollar stays in the community maybe 18 hours. Other communities as high as 23 days.
I was just going to say, it's like a whole month before it leaves their community, literally.
I mean, the concept of the PPP loan even proves that, because we use the money, Not with Black businesses, because if you look, hair and nail shops started opening back up. Flying started coming back. all these other
We
things.
went on vacation. We went and kicked it. We drank. We all of this stuff. And I need you guys to understand as we discuss these things. And I want you to look at the past 12 months with fresh eyes and how things have been done. And I want you to really fully understand as well why so many people were yelling the things that they were yelling on social media during the quarantine. Buy black, buy black, buy black. And y'all was like, cool, I support my black people. I get it. But I need you guys to understand why all of this matters and the depth. It wasn't just because I like my black people.
And I want to end it on a positive note that a lot of us do not know this information. And I get it. I say it from a position as an academic, but I didn't know it at one time either. So the thing is, if you want to change, reach out to me. There are other people that do what I do too. Reach out to people that can help you become aware of it. Because a lot of times too, people who know something can hold it in such disdain and look at people ignorantly. My PhD aside, I want to see everybody black win. I don't care if we get along.
Okay, Issa.
I want to see everybody win. Like my thing is, for everybody that's screwing it over, there's somebody who's got the next cure for something, the next dope restaurant, the next fly brand. So I want to see them win. Let's get that off the ground. So if you're serious about your business, reach out to me again on the socials. Year 60 YEAR 60 PHOTOG. And then specifically, if you're really serious about that, I have a separate company called Ghost Wolf. That's www.GWOLFEHOLDINGS.com.
And I'll make sure I put that on the website for you guys too, for an easy one click. Okay.
So let's, I hope that those go back and hear it. It's a lot to take in, and don't just believe me. Everything I look up, Google it, see if I'm lying.
I am study
to show that self-approval.
Listen, I am so grateful to have had you on the show right now, and even zooming out and just looking at the conversations that I've had previously. Like I said, my previous interview, we talked about intergenerational trauma of Blacks, and we talked about understanding mental health in the Black community. And the funny thing about it is, even we're talking about Black business now, but it all dwindled down to, I asked her, I said, Dr. Garrett, what is the thing that we can do to move forward? And she said what you said, we have a lack of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that's literally, you just said, we don't do it because we don't know. Right. And if you have the knowledge and you are Black, y'all, we got to shout it from the mountaintops. It takes nothing to get your message out there. We got to talk about it. We got to get it out there. And if you are one of those people who understands that you don't know, research. We have no excuses at this point. There's a podcast on any and every historical thing you can think of. If you don't want to read, you can listen to audiobooks. If you just want the snippet version, you can just Google it. I mean, y'all, we have no excuses. And at this point, we're in a place in history where a lot of the things that they try to hide in regards to Black history are being exposed, like Tulsa.
Now, please disprove a myth that my grandmother would say. You want to hide something from a Black person? Put it in a book.
Yeah. But guess what? Y'all, I don't want to hear it. Let me tell you. No, I'm going to tell you why. We really are at a place now, y'all. I have an Audible library of 396 titles. If there's a history book that is too thick for me to read, I can listen to it. Y'all, the knowledge is there. It's there for us. We have to go and get it. And that's the only way we're going to be able to grow and move forward as a community in any capacity, on a micro and a macro level.
Indeed.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I will say, I'm going to go ahead and say it on there. Look, you'll be back. I might wait till after you have the doctor so I can introduce you like that at doctor.
Okay.
So, but thank you so much for coming. You just dropped your socials. I also want them to make sure they check out your site. That's y60r.com. That's y60r.com. That's for your photography. If they follow me on the socials, they will see me tagging with you and everything. Because you just did my photos. They don't even know. That's how this whole interview came about. And also the other website, G Wolf Holdings. It's GWOLFE holdings.com. So if you are very serious about starting your business, you're very serious about doing this strategically, doing it the right way, and having a clear understanding, hit up Nizm. And then when you're ready for your branding, your logos, and all of that stuff, y'all hit me up. I mean, you and Nizm. When you're done with them, just call and be like, they ready for you, Kim. And
we're gonna have a nice little factory going. Just send them your way.
Assembly line in here. So y'all, thank you so much. We're gonna play a few more songs, then I'm gonna give y'all an outro. But thank you so much for listening again. If you missed any of the interview, get your butt on Patreon and get this full thing. It is so worth it. Supporters of this show can join us on Patreon, where for only $5 a month, you can access all past shows and exclusive content. Join now at patreon.com/SolseiCo. That's patreon.com/SOLSEICO. This podcast contains excerpts from New Soul Radio shows. For the full listening experience with music, visit newsoulradio.com. That's NUSOL radio.com.